Welcome to the Great White Brotherhood YouTube channel.
Hello, everyone. We're going to continue on with reading The Path of Mankind. And on this video, we're on Chapter 8, titled The Hard Life. So let's get going here. This chapter, which will describe an earthly incarnation with all its trials and tribulations, is, in a way, a continuation of the previous one, as the descent into physicality and the experiences, whilst in physicality, are part of the same long process from leaving the safety of the oversoul to the moment of release from physicality and the return home. So, we part here from the moment when a baby is born and the spirit, which is the true person, associates itself with that baby. That human fetus and all the baby springs to life. We say that a baby is born and the parents, generally, rejoice. It must be said that, for long ages, while the pendulum swing was in the negative part of God's kingdom, those who had nurtured that astral spirit for so long were sad, knowing the suffering that their charge would go through as he progressed through life until the moment of his release and return to the heavenly spheres. So we have the parents of a newborn babe rejoicing, but we have its spiritual parents sad. At the end of life, we have people generally sad at the demise of a loved one, whilst the angels rejoice at the safe return of their charge, battered and bruised by his incarnation, but nevertheless safe and sound and welcome back, once again, into the familiarity of his oversoul and all the friends and family that may also belong to that oversoul. Then the angels, who have closely watched over their spirit during this earthly incarnation, sing for joy at the safe return home of their charge. Events that can occur when a person returns home will be discussed in a later chapter, but for the moment, we are concerned with the earthly incarnation, its purpose, and its objective. So we have a newborn babe, born into its chosen family with its chosen sex orientation, born into the country of its choice, the language of that country, and the family social standing, rich or poor, highly educated or ignorant of such knowledge. As this was carefully chosen by the Spirit in conjunction with guides and angels long before the baby was thought of, when it was just a twinkle in the parent's eye, as the saying goes, because it is at this point that decisions are being taken by the angels as to who will be incarnate in that family. And so we have a baby that is going to be lovingly nurtured, one hopes, by its parents. This is not always the case, of course, but this would already have been known to the incarnating spirit who purposely chose to be born to gain experience, unpleasant, excuse me, unpleasant as it will be, to further the knowledge fed via his oversoul into the God force. All knowledge is precious, not just pleasant knowledge, but unpleasant as well. Now, we break off completely in our description of incarnation, which incidentally means in the flesh, to question why a human is born with the form that he has. After all, the incarnating spirit is pure light, so it might seem logical that the human form would follow that shape and a baby born as a round ball, a sphere, like its incarnating spirit. It will be quickly realized that such a shape would be ridiculous. A ball might be the correct shape for people to kick around a field, but would not be very practical for developing life on Earth. Those who examine life on Earth have realized that most creatures follow a basic pattern, which is a head, a body, two arms, and two legs. This form was chosen by the archangelic beings who were tasked with creating life forms and physicality, because it obviously gave the greatest chance of mobility and the ability to feed and defend itself. Virtually all creatures have this basic form, although some have altered their shape in order either to develop different methods of locomotion or to live in different environments. We are thinking, for example, of birds who have altered their arms to make wings in order to fly. Also, fish spring to mind, as well as dolphins and whales, who have, once again, sacrificed arms and legs in order to be able to swim in the water. We could go on, but we wish to make quite clear to you that this basic shape that we described was chosen because it enables life to develop more quickly. It will be noted that creatures that chose not to develop arms and legs, snails, clams, and various other life forms, have not really developed at all for millions of years because life without true mobility in arms to gather food or to defend oneself have caused a barrier to progression. We wish the readers of this book also to accept that when alien life creates robotic life forms to visit Earth, almost invariably they choose some form of this basic pattern previously described, as they have noticed that it gives their created life forms the greatest chance to operate on Earth and occasionally to pass unnoticed by real humans on Earth. Some of these created life forms, which we repeat are actually robots, resemble humanity so much that they can move amongst us undetected. It would only be a person with psychic abilities highly developed that could detect that these entities are not real humans, but soulless robotic life forms. Hmm. However, we return to the born babe, we hope, who, we hope, has a body exactly like his parents in miniature. We feel a desire to sympathize with the suffering that the mother went through to deliver the baby, and that is because the human abdomen is poorly developed for producing offspring compared to animals, who, incidentally, were developed to populate planet Earth, humans being more recent visitors. The body of a human female would have to be greatly modified in order to give birth easily, and we hardly think that the resulting body shape would be considered attractive to modern females. So the struggle to help a baby be born continues. The aforementioned baby is completely helpless for several months until it develops the power to stand up and walk. So it, in its early stages, depends on adults to feed, clothe, and generally care for the young person. Once again, we break off to compare a baby in its prime infancy to many animals who, just minutes after being born, can stand, walk, and even run, something that a human baby cannot do for a long time. This indicates to us quite clearly that we humans are not natural to planet Earth, but are visitors that incarnate for a purpose which will be explained later. So we watch the baby grow, take its first steps, and starts to become a real thinking human, getting more and more independent from its parents. Although in most good families, the parents keep a close eye on their charge to protect it from making drastic errors from a physical or mental point of view. As so, the infant grows. Generally speaking, he concentrates all his energies on exploring the world around him and is totally ignorant of any spiritual aspect to him, despite him being made totally from God force. We fast forward a few years to the point where the child is able to think for itself. Now, if the educational system was better structured, the spiritual aspect of humanity would be very much included in the educational curriculum, but generally speaking, it isn't. In many schools today, any mention of spirituality is banned, even in so called religious schools. Spiritual education is limited to learning lessons from books about religion, and so the child will leave that school with little or no knowledge of the nature of spirituality. This, of course, as has been already mentioned, is the work of the archons and their minions who run educational systems in much of the world. It is hoped that this will change as and when the archons and the psychopaths are removed from any sphere of influence. But at the moment, we must accept life as it is, with all its faults, and it is our task to produce information that will provide some level of education to seekers after truth. So, as the child grows, following a curriculum of education strictly controlled by the evil forces that ensure that when that child leaves school, He might have some degree, if extremely limited, of knowledge of basic education, but that curriculum has totally ignored any mention of spirituality as opposed to religion. It will be noticed by older generations that even knowledge imparted concerning basic skill patterns, reading, writing, maths, geography, and so on, is extremely limited compared with education implanted in the minds of young years ago, and so many leave school with no real ability to communicate by this written or spoken word, no ability, or very little, to calculate, and virtually no knowledge of geography of the world. The excuse given is that in a modern world where computer devices, excuse me, the excuse given is that in a modern world where computer devices can do so much for us, there is no need to learn basic skills. A moment's thought should indicate that this is a blatant attempt by the evil ones to stifle the brain's ability to think, because the brain is a tool that can expand or contract, not physically, but intellectually, according to how much use one makes of it. One can compare the brain to a muscle which, through exercise, can grow stronger and can serve the body more effectively, whereas, if use is not made of those same muscles, they atrophy and are unable to be used by the person in an effective manner. The brain is much the same. Intellectual stimulus causes it to grow stronger, and lack of stimulus causes it to diminish. Learning to operate a computer is an important part of modern life, but in no way can it replace studying and manipulating language or mathematics. One wonders if the day will ever come when there will be no one left to create the language or mathematical programs. Then, if that sad day should ever occur, there would be nothing left to appear on the computer screen. We should perhaps reveal that this scenario has already been considered by the evil ones, and they are developing artificial intelligence to take over when and if human brain should stop. If the human brain should stop. However, we fully expect this unhappy event will never be brought to fruition because of the timely move of the galaxy into the light of God, which will chase the evil ones and their horrible plans from ever becoming reality. We expect that the more traditional forms of education will return, and we will have a happy blend of fully active brains working alongside AI. The computers reducing the chores of communication and calculation, but nevertheless, children being taught to think and communicate fully as was intended by God when He created life. In the meantime, all over the world, we have generations of people unable to think for themselves and are thus easy to manipulate by the evil ones. Let us now move on to the moment when the young person leaves school, but instead of being armed to assume his place and his role in adult environment, is really only able to do manual labor or join the countless unemployed masses. All this was planned long ago. We have intelligent young men and women totally incapable of assuming any real role in society and forced to accept low paid employment if they can find a place, or forced to spend long years barely surviving on unemployment handouts. Excuse me. Thank you. Unemployment is not a natural way for humans to live. We should all be in a position to contribute to society instead of taking from it. Also, there is an old but true expression: the devil finds work for idle hands. This, once again, is the plan of the evil ones, who provide drugs in unlimited quantities to further cause atrophy of what little brain is left for many. Then, the entertainment media provides endless violence in the form of news and films, once again, carefully planned so that people grow considering that violence is a normal part of life. So, so people pass their time in a confused state, unable to understand why they are here on earth and what purpose life holds. This lack of information concerning the function of humanity and its relation to God and to all of God's creation is, as has been already explained, deliberately planned and carefully put into operation. If people are kept in the dark concerning their origins and their destiny, while at the same time leaving them without any real means of thinking for themselves, nor any effective ability to read and write, the effect of all that is generations stumbling through life in a depressed, confused, and bitter state of mind, which is the complete opposite of the way that life was meant to develop. Imagine if it were possible for young people to be taught to think for themselves, to contact their higher selves, the source of all knowledge, to be able to share that knowledge via the spoken or written word, and by telepathic communication. What a different world would be created, indeed. It has previously been mentioned that the archons, this race of etheric entities that have, unfortunately, been so necessary in the process of recharging God's batteries, cannot really think for themselves, but are determined to destroy God's master plan for humanity as far as they can. They are experts at taking anything good and positive, turning it upside down, and presenting it as evil, influencing psychopathic controllers of humanity to enforce laws to forbid positive concepts and promoting negative concepts as the only way that humanity is allowed to act. Thus, we have the situation that exists today, and that is hoped by the archons and the evil ones will continue for all eternity. As we have explained, their plan will fail, but for the meantime, it is in the full swing, and we must live in this reality until we can bring about change as we move gradually into the light. Let us continue with the story of young people growing to maturity, thinking that this sad world in which they live is normal and is the only way life can be. Now, at school today, sex education, which has long been a bone of contention by prudish educationalists in the past, must be discussed. Until fairly recently, it was generally ignored in schools, and young people grew to manhood or womanhood with their only knowledge about the opposite sex being gleaned from photographs purchased under the counter from purveyors of semi pornographic material. Any discussion of the physical attributes of the opposite sex was discouraged, and thus some people were greatly surprised when they did discover just what the opposite sex actually looked like. There are stories treated in There are stories treated in comical fashion of people getting married in total ignorance of the difference between men and women and how the procreation act is performed, and were horrified when they discovered the truth on their wedding night. This situation was, of course, ridiculous. Seems like it. One of the reasons that man incarnates is to produce others to incarnate, and the sex act is the prime method of doing this. This is the reason that the sex drive is so powerful in young people. Once again, we see in religions how something perfectly normal and necessary to the continuance of humanity was banned until the sacred day of marriage, and then the couple, safely enmeshed in whatever religion that they were involved in, were encouraged to produce as many offspring as possible, all the children being captured into the same religion, thus allowing this religion to have a greater stranglehold on the world's population. In some countries today, it is law that all people of those countries must be part of that religion, and the religion and the law of the country being one and the same. This was largely the case throughout the world until fairly recent times, until a split between church and state was introduced, not an attempt by the state to free people from the clutches of the church, but so that the state could assume the role of guardians of the people. It was and is just another means of controlling humanity under the pretext of liberating them. So, once again, we were in a situation where the young were kept in the dark about such a simple and necessary process, the sex act. Eventually, in some countries, it was decided that sex education should be introduced. One would think that this would be a good and positive move towards decomplexing young people about the mysteries of the opposite sex. However, we must always remember that the archons are never far away, active and ready to seize on any positive idea, turn it on its head, and create evil from it if they can. Thus, as how to present sex education to young people was being considered, the concept of homosexuality was brought up and much thought by those under the control of the archons was given into how to twist it into something evil. So, the inevitable idea that homosexuality is a good and natural act, the opposite of how nature would naturally manifest itself, was brought into the educational system and introduced. Now, naturally, we must explain and qualify that statement. This has already been discussed at length in the book, The Stairway to Freedom, and we encourage all who are confused concerning homosexuality to peruse that book for full explanation. However, for those who have not read that book, we will state that it occurs from time to time. A person who incarnates in the body, whilst his spirit, his personality, is of the opposite sex to the body in which he incarnates. This happens, and although it is the opposite to what should occur, we accept that a homosexual is born and must follow his instincts. We do not condemn that, because it is very courageous of the individual to accept to incarnate in a body with which he is not emotionally in agreement. But, as we just mentioned, the Archon control people in charge of education systems seized upon the concept as a means of sowing yet more discord, which is always their aim. So, teachers were instructed to educate young, confused children to experiment with same gender sex. This obviously is evil and will be abolished as soon as the power of the evil ones is reduced. Luckily, the majority of those children reject this evil and turn towards relationships with members of the opposite sex. Thus, a degree of balance is restored. Eventually, the young people turn to the idea of forming a permanent relationship with someone of the opposite sex. Once again, this has been discussed at length in the first volume of this series of books, and we don't wish to bore you by repeating endlessly information that, if you had read the first volume as we suggested, you should already be familiar. So, the young people reach out and, by the law of mutual attraction, manage to find a partner. Excuse me. This concept of living in a relationship with another person is actually a lot more complicated than appears on the surface. The relationship functions on many levels and should not be entered into lightly. Un- Unfortunately, for various reasons, the bond is usually sealed through the sex act. Once this occurs, it is a tacit agreement that a partnership is bonded. This is unfortunate because, all too often, once the first excitement caused by the sex act passes, the couple find that they do not actually have much in common, and so the partnership fails. It would be far better if the people took the time really to get to know each other before sealing the bond through the sex act instead of, as is so often the case, the sex part passes first and the getting to know each other part passes last. The result is the endless stream of broken relationships, unwanted children, and general unhappiness instead of a loving family relationships that should occur. Do we, once again, feel the hand of the archons promoting this upside down way of living? So, we suggest a more sensible way of forming families, one where young people meet a number of potential partners, get to know them well, and await the gestalt moment that will eventually occur when the chosen partner comes into view. Everyone has at least one perfect partner. There may be more than one, but there is at least one partner for each person with whom the individual under discussion can share his incarnation with, and with whom he can share the long ages in the spirit world when both incarnations have terminated. Then will the love last throughout the lives of the couple, and then will the children be raised in a loving relationship, and broken marriages with all the stress, trauma, and unhappiness that the ending of a relationship entails becomes a thing of the past instead of practically the norm as it is at the moment. The archons gain great power through the unhappiness caused by having chosen the wrong partner, and we should all do what we can to lessen their stranglehold on us instead of feeding them, as is the case now. The technique for drawing the perfect partner has already been described elsewhere, but it is important enough to repeat. It, like all spiritual matters, is simple. One sits on one's own in a room with any doors and windows shut. One quite simply asks God to send the perfect partner, and then one thanks God that the message is being sent on the wings of angels to the person. Then, also, by the law of mutual attraction, those two people will eventually meet. Patience and discernment will be required, as the perfect partner may live far away, but rest assured that the couple will meet. Both will feel the Gestalt formed when that magic event occurs. This Gestalt is the result of the birth of love, not passion, not desire, but love. This feeling of love will instantly fill the hearts of both people and will create a feeling of joy. This gestalt is unmistakable, and all people desiring to meet their perfect partner should wait, with faith and expectancy, that glorious moment. However, we must face reality as it exists for many couples who made hurried and incorrect marriages. Once again, the subject has been discussed at length in the book The Stairway to Freedom and will not be discussed here except to say that, particularly when there are children involved, that it would be wise to repress one's disappointment and wrong decisions and try to live in harmony together. The perfect partner can still be found by those in the heavenly spheres, and then the couple can progress together throughout time in love. An earthly incarnation seems long, but out of all eternity, it is not very long. Most people find that their incarnation on earth is hard. Life is meant to be a joyous thing, but how many people reach the end of it and look back with contentment, the joy of having passed a moment of their long existence as God itself, and the bliss that we imagine that being God would entail? Very few, it would suggest. The vast majority of people, when their incarnation ends and they find themselves in the love of the heavenly spheres, look back over their earthly incarnation more as more as a nightmare incident and are only too glad that reincarnation is not a fact. Very few people, indeed, would wish to return to this dark planet. And yet, if we are all God, why is it that we have not collectively created paradise on earth instead of this hellish place that we are only too glad to quit? This, of course, has been explained in previous chapters where we elucidated the pendulum swing into and out of spiritual darkness. So there is little point in trying to explain the various traumas that an earthly incarnation brings to us. You who are incarnate at the moment are only too aware of how disagreeable life on earth is. We mention it in order to assure you that this type of life will gradually draw to a close as the pendulum swings back again into spiritual light. We must expect that the archons and their psychopathic minions will do all that they can to stop this swing into spiritual light, but of course they cannot. Nothing can halt this procession back and forth. So, although we do fully appreciate that life for so many is scarcely bearable, but we ask you to be courageous and be assured that life will improve. We, who dictate this book, also had earthly incarnations, some of us at a time when things were a lot worse than they generally are now, and some of us still bear the scars of that incarnation. So we appreciate what you are going through. But times change gradually, and the time of evil is over. Light, spiritual light, is starting to pour into the auras of planet Earth and of all creatures and beings incarnate, and will gradually eradicate the darkness. Love, joy, and harmony is the destiny of future man waiting to incarnate, and they will lead a truly God-filled life. Please remember that God is everywhere and in all things, but as we mentioned, even God has to recharge his batteries, so to speak, in order to be able to illuminate future incarnations. So thank you very much for watching and listening to Chapter 8 of the book. As always, please ask any questions, provide any feedback. The questions don't have to be specifically related to this chapter. They can be on anything if you wish. And I'll answer them as and when I can. And thank you once again. And I look forward to seeing you all again on the next video. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. Please visit our website at thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org for free books and lessons to help you on your spiritual journey.